The blue-green planet of Curia hung in the darkness of space, its 3 moons forming a perfect triangle in orbit. Captain Lee stood on the bridge of the Earth diplomatic vessel Harmony, her eyes fixed on the view screen. The distress signal had been playing for 3 hours now, a repeating pattern of sounds that the ship's computers had finally decoded. "Send men to reproduce, or our species will vanish forever." Those words had caused quite a stir among the crew. Some laughed nervously, others raised eyebrows in concern, but Captain Lee maintained her professional demeanor. First contact situations were always delicate, and mistranslations were common. "Officer Kim, prepare the landing team," she ordered. "Standard diplomatic protocols." Kim nodded, her short black hair bouncing slightly as she moved to the communications panel. "The signal origin shows a large settlement near the equator. Their technology appears advanced, possibly level 3. The Harmony entered orbit around Curia, scanning the surface. Cities dotted the continents, connected by sleek transportation networks. Whoever these aliens were, they had built an impressive civilization. No signs of warfare or environmental catastrophe, reported Science Officer Moon, studying the readouts. Whatever threatens them isn't visible from orbit. Captain Lee assembled her team. Ambassador Park, the seasoned diplomat, Dr. Song, the xenobiologist, Security Chief Kang, and herself. They boarded the shuttle and descended through the atmosphere, watching as the landscape grew larger beneath them. "Beautiful," whispered Ambassador Park as they broke through the cloud layer. Below stretched vast forests of purple-leaved trees and winding rivers that glittered in the sunlight. Their shuttle landed on a designated platform outside a towering structure of white stone and glass. As the door opened, the team was met with warm, fragrant air that smelled faintly of cinnamon. "Remarkable oxygen content," noted Dr. Song, checking her instruments, "almost identical to Earth." A delegation approached from the building. Captain Lee straightened her uniform and stepped forward, ready to make first contact. Then she paused, noticing something unusual. All 7 of the aliens appeared female. They were humanoid, with slender bodies, iridescent blue-tinted skin, and large, almond-shaped eyes. Their hair ranged from silver to deep blue, flowing past their shoulders. Each wore robes of shimmering fabric that seemed to change color with their movements. Ambassador Park moved forward, hands open in the universal gesture of peace. "We come from Earth, responding to your call for assistance. I am Ambassador Park, representing the United Earth Alliance." The tallest alien stepped forward. "I am High Elder Naira of Curia. We welcome you with grateful hearts." Her voice was melodic, with perfect command of the Earth language, likely learned from transmitted broadcasts. "You received our message." "We did," Captain Lee said carefully, "though we believe there might be some translation issues to clarify." Naira's expression became solemn. "No misunderstanding exists. Our species faces extinction. Please, join us inside where we can discuss our situation properly." The interior of the building was a marvel of architecture. Soaring ceilings with sunlight filtering through crystal panels, creating rainbows across polished floors. The humans were led to a circular chamber where more Curians waited, all appearing female. "Where are the male members of your species?" Dr. Song asked, unable to contain her scientific curiosity. A silence fell over the room. Elder Naira gestured to seats arranged around a central table. "That is precisely our crisis," she explained once everyone was seated. "There are no males among our people. Not anymore." Captain Lee leaned forward. "I don't understand." A younger Curian activated a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed genetic sequences and population graphs spanning centuries. "I am Lyra, chief geneticist," she introduced herself. 500 cycles ago, we detected the first signs of genetic degradation affecting male births. At first, it was rare. 1 in 1,000 births produced non-viable male offspring. The hologram shifted, showing the trend accelerating. Within 3 generations, no male Curians survived past early development. Our scientists created artificial methods to continue reproduction, using stored genetic material. But the material degraded, Dr. Song guessed, studying the displays with intense interest. Lyra nodded. Our civilization developed technology to merge genetic material from two females, but without the diversity once provided by males, each generation becomes weaker. We have perhaps one more generation before total collapse. Ambassador Park's diplomatic training couldn't hide her shock. And you believe humans can help? High Elder Nara stepped forward again. Our deep space observations discovered your world 20 cycles ago. We've studied your broadcasts, your biology. Of all species we found, humans show the highest genetic compatibility with Kyrians. Security Chief Kang, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. You're asking for human males to. What exactly? Not what you might think. Lyra clarified quickly. We need genetic material only. Specifically, what you call Y chromosomes. With that, we might restore what was lost. Captain Lee felt relief wash over her. This was a scientific mission, not whatever the crude translation had suggested. Our species will die without this help, Elder Naira said, her voice breaking slightly. We have resources, technology we can trade. We ask not for permanent settlement of humans on our world, only for the genetic keys to our survival. Ambassador Park nodded thoughtfully. This requires careful consideration and consultation with our scientists. May we examine your research and better understand the compatibility you've identified. Of course, Lyra agreed, gesturing to her assistants who brought forward data crystals. Everything we know is yours to study. As the meeting continued, Captain Lee observed the interactions between her team and the Kyrians. Despite their alien appearance, there was something deeply familiar about their desperation, a species fighting for its future, reaching out across the stars for help. Later, as the human team discussed their findings privately, Dr. Song could barely contain her excitement. Their genetic structure is fascinating, nearly compatible with ours despite evolving on different worlds, she exclaimed. It defies conventional evolutionary theory. Can we actually help them? Captain Lee asked directly. Dr. Song nodded slowly. I believe so. With our genetic technology and their advanced biological sciences, we might create a solution. But it won't be as simple as they hope. Ambassador Park looked out the window at the beautiful Kyrian city, a society without males for generations. Helping them might save their species, but it will also change their entire culture forever. Captain Lee considered this as she watched the 3 moons of Kyria rise in the darkening sky. First contact had taken an unexpected turn, but the mission was clear. A dying species had called for help, and humanity had answered. The human delegation settled into the guest quarters provided by the Kyrians. The rooms were spacious, with curved walls and furniture that seemed to grow directly from the floor. Strange blue plants glowed softly, providing natural light. Dr. Song spent hours studying the genetic data provided by Lyra. She barely noticed when Captain Lee entered her room. Any progress? Captain Lee asked, setting down a tray of local fruits that the Kyrians had assured were safe for human consumption. Dr. Song looked up from her tablet, dark circles under her eyes. Their biology is remarkable. The Kyrians evolved from a species with 3 sexes originally. 3? Captain Lee picked up a purple fruit that smelled like mint. Yes. What we're seeing now is just one of their sexes, what we might call female, though it's not a perfect comparison. Their second sex produced specific enzymes for reproduction, and the third carried different genetic material. Dr. Song rubbed her tired eyes. When the second sex began to disappear, they adapted. When the third vanished, their whole reproductive system collapsed. Ambassador Park joined them, looking troubled. We have a situation developing. Some crew members are uncomfortable with the Kyrians' request. What's the problem? Captain Lee bit into the fruit, finding it surprisingly sweet. Misunderstandings about what help is being requested, Park explained. Officer Kang overheard some crew members joking about volunteering for the mission. Captain Lee frowned. That's not what they're asking for. No, but the mistranslation has led to crude assumptions. I've also received a message from Earth Command questioning the ethics of providing reproductive assistance. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime. A Kyrian attendant appeared at the doorway, her silver hair elaborately braided. High Elder Naira requests your presence at tonight's gathering. It is a great honor. The council rarely invites outsiders to the evening ceremony. The humans exchanged glances before Captain Lee answered, "We would be honored to attend." That evening, they were led to a vast chamber near the top of the central spire. Hundreds of Kyrians stood in concentric circles around a pool of glowing blue liquid. The walls were open to the night, letting in cool air and the light of the three moons. Ambassador Park whispered to Captain Lee, "Remember, we're here to observe and respect their customs, not impose our own." High Elder Naira greeted them, wearing ceremonial robes that shimmered with embedded crystals. "Tonight we celebrate the remembrance of unity." Before the fading began, all three aspects of our people would gather to renew our biological harmony. The ceremony began with haunting music played on instruments that looked like curved glass. The Kyrians moved in intricate patterns around the pool, their movements telling a story the humans couldn't fully understand. Officer Kane shifted uncomfortably beside Captain Lee. "This feels like we're intruding on something private," he whispered. Captain Lee nodded slightly but kept her attention on the ceremony. As it progressed, several Kyrians stepped into the glowing pool. The liquid clung to their skin, creating patterns of light. Later, at the feast that followed, Senior Scientist Ju found himself seated beside Lyra. The tables were laden with strange but appealing foods. "Your ceremony was beautiful," he said, trying to use the eating utensils that resembled tuning forks. "Though I'm not sure I understood its meaning." Lyra helped adjust his grip on the utensils. "It honors the time when our species was complete, all three aspects in harmony. The pool represents the joining fluid, where genetic material was once exchanged naturally." Ju nearly choked on his food. "I see." Across the table, Ambassador Park was engaged in conversation with Elder Naira and another council member named Taylor. "Your society seems very organized," Park observed. "How is leadership determined among your people?" "By wisdom and contribution," Taylor explained. "Each Kyrian serves where her talents are strongest. Those who show exceptional insight may be invited to join the council." "And before the genetic crisis," Park asked carefully, "were leadership roles divided among your three sexes?" A tense silence fell over their section of the table. Elder Naira set down her utensils. "That is a complex question," she said finally. "The aspects each had different roles. The nurturers, what you might call female, led in governance and planning. The catalysts facilitated change and mediated conflicts. The shapers worked with environment and structure." "I apologize if my question was insensitive," Park said quickly. "No offense is taken," Naira assured her, "but you should understand. Restoring our lost aspects is not about returning to past arrangements. Our society has evolved. We seek genetic restoration, not cultural regression." Later that night, the human team gathered to discuss what they had learned. "I think we misunderstood their request," Dr. Song said. "They don't want human males to physically reproduce with them. They need genetic material to recreate their lost catalyst and shaper sexes." "That's a relief," Officer Kang muttered. "But there's something they're not telling us," Captain Lee said. "Did you notice how uncomfortable they became when Ambassador Park asked about their past social structure?" Ambassador Park nodded thoughtfully. "I suspect there's historical conflict they're omitting. Perhaps the disappearance of the other sexes wasn't entirely natural." The next morning, Dr. Song and Scientist Ju were invited to the main genetics laboratory. The facility was impressive. Equipment more advanced than Earth's best research centers. Lyra introduced them to her team, all wearing the same silver lab coats. "We've prepared simulations based on the preliminary compatibility tests." The holographic display showed human and Kyrian DNA strands intertwining, then separating, leaving modified sequences behind. "Your proposal isn't what we expected," Dr. Song admitted. You don't want human settlers or donors. You want to extract specific genetic sequences to recreate your lost biological diversity. Yes, Lyra confirmed. We need the blueprint, not the builders. Scientist Ju studied the simulation with concern. But this would fundamentally alter your species. Are your people prepared for such a change? Lyra's expression tightened. Not everyone agrees with this approach. Some believe we should accept our fate as a single-sex species and find new ways to ensure genetic diversity. Others, she hesitated. Others? Dr. Song prompted. Some factions believe we should abandon biological reproduction entirely and transfer our consciousness to synthetic forms. Back at the diplomatic quarters, Captain Lee received a secure transmission from Earth Command. The situation is more complex than we initially understood, she reported to her superiors. They're requesting genetic research assistance, not physical reproduction. Their society appears stable but divided on how to address their crisis. The response came quickly. Proceed with caution. Genetic sharing carries significant ethical implications. Ensure all assistance respects their autonomy while protecting human genetic heritage. That evening, a young Kyrian named Mira approached Ambassador Park in the garden. She looked nervous, constantly checking to see if others were nearby. There's something you should know, she whispered. The Council isn't telling you everything. The disappearance of our other aspects wasn't just a genetic accident. What do you mean? Park asked quietly. It was partly by design. The ancient nurturers feared the influence of the other aspects and altered reproduction to favor female births. Mira's voice trembled. Some of us believe helping restore what was lost is justice, not just survival. Before Park could ask more questions, Mira hurried away as Elder Tella approached. Is everything all right, Ambassador? Tella asked, her tone pleasant, but her eyes sharp. Yes, Park said smoothly, just admiring your beautiful gardens and learning about your history. Tella's smile didn't reach her eyes. History can be so challenging to interpret correctly, especially for visitors. I hope you won't be misled by incomplete perspectives. As the 3 moons rose over Kyria that night, the humans realized that saving this alien species would require navigating not just scientific challenges, but also the complex waters of a society divided by secrets from its own past. Morning sunlight filtered through the crystal windows of the Kyrian laboratory as Dr. Song stared at test results displaying on the holographic screen. For 3 weeks, the joint human-Kyrian research team had worked tirelessly, but progress remained frustratingly slow. The same problem again, she sighed, pushing back from the workstation. The human Y chromosome analogs bond initially, but then break down within hours. Across the lab, scientist Ju carefully handled a set of glowing vials containing genetic material. The Kyrian genetic scientists moved with practiced precision among their advanced equipment. Despite their technical skills, a sense of quiet desperation hung in the air. Lyra approached with a tray of steaming cups. You should try this. It helps with mental focus. Dr. Song accepted the drink gratefully. It tasted like honey and mint with a slight tingling sensation. Thank you. I think we need to reconsider our approach. Something fundamental is missing. Lyra nodded, her silver hair catching the light. Our ancestors left extensive records of our biology before the fading began. Perhaps there's something there we've overlooked. Captain Lee entered the laboratory with Elder Naira. Over the past weeks, the captain had spent most of her time in diplomatic discussions, leaving the scientific work to her team. Today, she looked concerned. How is the research progressing? She asked. Dr. Song shook her head. Not well. We can create temporary bonds between human and Kyrian genetic material, but nothing stable enough for reproduction. Elder Naira's normally composed expression faltered. Time grows short. The last generation born from our genetic reserves shows signs of increased mutation. There might be another option, Scientist Ju said hesitantly. But it would require access to your historical archives. The deep archives, not just the scientific records you've provided. A silence fell over the laboratory. The Kyrian scientists exchanged glances. "The deep archives are restricted," Lyra said finally. "They contain sensitive information about what happened to your other sexes." Dr. Song asked directly. Elder Nyra's eyes widened slightly. "What have you heard?" Captain Lee stepped forward. Ambassador Park spoke with a young Kyrian named Mira. She suggested the disappearance of your other biological aspects wasn't entirely natural. For a moment, the tension in the room felt thick enough to cut. Then Elder Nyra sighed deeply. "I suppose we cannot ask for your help while hiding our past." She gestured toward a door at the back of the lab. "Come, I will show you what you need to see." They followed Elder Nyra through several security checkpoints, descending deep beneath the main spire. The final door opened into a vast chamber filled with ancient storage devices and preserved biological specimens. 600 cycles ago, our society was different, Elder Nyra explained as they walked. The three aspects lived in uneasy balance. Nurturers controlled governance, catalysts managed resources, and shapers built our cities. Conflict was common. She activated a historical display showing three distinct Kyrian types: the familiar blue-skinned females, plus orange-skinned and green-skinned variants with different physical features. A series of resource wars led to a power shift. When nurturers gained control of reproduction technology, they made adjustments, subtle at first, just favoring nurturer births. But over generations, the genetic manipulations damaged the viability of the other aspects. Dr. Song studied the display with growing excitement. So the degradation wasn't random. It was engineered, then spiraled out of control. Yes, Elder Nyra admitted. By the time our ancestors realized the damage they had done, it was too late. The knowledge to reverse it was lost. Scientist Ju moved to a preserved specimen, genetic material in a crystal container. "Is this from before the manipulation?" "Our oldest sample," Lyra confirmed. "But it's damaged beyond use, or so we believed." Dr. Song's eyes lit up. "May I?" Given permission, she carefully scanned the ancient sample with her equipment. "This changes everything. The problem isn't compatibility. It's that we've been trying to merge with your current genetics. But your current genetics are already compromised." For the next 3 days, the team worked without rest. They used the ancient sample as a template, rebuilding what had been lost rather than trying to adapt human genetics to the Kyrians' damaged DNA. On the 4th day, scientist Ju burst into Captain Lee's quarters. "We did it." The captain followed him back to the lab where Dr. Song stood proudly beside a containment unit. Inside floated a tiny cluster of cells glowing with healthy green light. "It's stable," Dr. Song explained. "We used the ancient template to create a correction sequence, then applied it to current Kyrian genetics with human stabilizers." Lyra looked at the cells with tears in her eyes. "This is a catalyst embryo, the first in 500 cycles." Word spread quickly through the city. By evening, a crowd had gathered outside the research center. Captain Lee watched from a window as Kyrians of all ages waited for news. "Not everyone will be happy about this," Elder Nyra said quietly, joining her at the window. "Some fear what change will mean for our society." "Change is coming regardless," Captain Lee replied. "Extinction or adaptation, those were always the only choices." Later that night, as the 3 moons of Kyria cast their light over the city, the research team successfully created a second type of embryo, this one glowing orange. "A shaper," Lyra whispered in awe. "I never thought I would see one." Dr. Song carefully monitored the development. "The genetic structure is stabilizing. I believe we've solved the fundamental problem." Ambassador Park, who had joined them for the breakthrough, asked the question on everyone's mind. "What happens now? How will your society reintegrate these lost aspects after so many generations?" Elder Nyra looked thoughtful. "That is the greater challenge ahead. Our society has been shaped by nurturers alone for centuries. Many will resist change." As if summoned by her words, a commotion erupted outside the lab. Elder Tella burst in, followed by several council members. "The work must stop immediately," she demanded. "The council has not approved full restoration of the lost aspects." "But we've succeeded," Lyra protested. "We can save our species." "At what cost?" Elder Tella challenged. "Our society has found balance. Reintroducing the aspects will bring chaos. The same conflicts our ancestors sought to end." Captain Lee watched the Kyrians argue among themselves. What had begun as a scientific mission had become something far more complex. They weren't just saving the species, they were potentially transforming an entire civilization. In the midst of the heated debate, Dr. Song quietly continued her work, carefully nurturing the tiny embryos that represented not just survival, but a return to biological diversity for the Kyrian people. The scientific breakthrough was complete, but the greater challenge was just beginning. The central meeting hall of the Kyrian Council was filled to capacity. Hundreds of citizens had gathered to witness the emergency session called to address the humans' scientific breakthrough. Captain Lee and her team sat in a special section reserved for honored visitors, watching as Elder Naira and Elder Tella took positions on opposite sides of the circular speaking platform. "This is not just a scientific question," Elder Tella's voice carried throughout the chamber. "It is about the very identity of our people. For 500 cycles, we have been a society of nurturers. Our laws, our customs, our very way of thinking has evolved around this reality." Elder Naira stepped forward. "And we face extinction because of it. The genetic degradation worsens with each generation. The humans have given us the chance to restore what was lost." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Captain Lee leaned toward Ambassador Park. "I didn't expect our help would cause such division," she whispered. Park nodded grimly. "We've given them the tools to save themselves, but we've also reopened old wounds." A middle-aged Kyrian stood from her seat in the audience section. "I wish to speak." When recognized by the council, she continued, "I am a historian. Our records show that before the fading, our society experienced constant conflict between the three aspects. The peace we know today came only after the catalysts and shapers vanished. A peace that will end with our extinction," shouted a younger voice. Mira pushed her way to the front. "We have forgotten that our strength once came from the balance of all three aspects working together." The debate continued for hours. Some Kyrians argued for full restoration of the three aspects. Others suggested creating only enough diversity to ensure genetic stability without changing their social structure. A smaller faction proposed abandoning biological reproduction entirely in favor of consciousness transfer to artificial bodies. Outside the council chamber, Dr. Song and scientist Ju continued their work in the laboratory, now under guard to prevent any interference. The embryos were developing normally, their cells multiplying and differentiating exactly as planned. "The shapers are showing faster neural development," Dr. Song noted, studying the readouts. "And the catalysts have a fascinating endocrine system. Their bodies would produce complex hormones that affected all three aspects." Lyra worked beside them, her hands moving with precision despite her obvious exhaustion. In the old stories, catalysts could sense emotional states and mediate conflicts. Shapers could visualize complex structures and build things no nurturer could imagine. "Complementary traits," Ju observed. "Your species evolved to function as a balanced system, not separate groups competing for dominance." Captain Lee was summoned back to the council chamber the next morning. Elder Naira looked as though she hadn't slept. "The debate continues without resolution," she explained. "I fear our society may fracture over this issue." "Perhaps we can offer another perspective," Captain Lee suggested. "Dr. Song has been studying your ancient biology. She may have insights that could help." Dr. Song was nervous as she addressed the Kyrian Council, but her voice was steady. "In studying your genetics, we've discovered something remarkable. The three aspects of your species appear to have evolved not as competitors, but as a cooperative system. Each aspect produces biological compounds needed by the others. Your ancestors' attempt to favor nurturers disrupted this balance, causing the genetic degradation that threatens you now. She displayed a holographic model showing how hormones and enzymes would have flowed between the three aspects in their original state. You were never meant to be separate. You were designed to be interconnected. A heavy silence fell over the chamber as the Kyrians absorbed this information. Then Elder Tella asked the question many were thinking. If we restore all three aspects, what becomes of our current society? Do we surrender everything we have built? Ambassador Park stepped forward. If I may offer an observation, change doesn't mean erasure. Earth has undergone many social transformations throughout our history. The key is managing change thoughtfully, not fearing it. That evening, a smaller group gathered in Elder Naira's private chambers. Captain Lee, Ambassador Park, Dr. Song, and Scientist Ju represented the humans. Elder Naira, Elder Tela, Lyra, and Mira represented different Kyrian perspectives. Perhaps there is a middle path, Dr. Song suggested after much discussion. What if we create a modified restoration? We could incorporate the essential genetic diversity needed for stability without fully returning to your original biology. Elder Tela looked interested for the first time. Explain. Instead of recreating the exact catalyst and shaper genetics, we could develop variants that provide the necessary biological functions while being more compatible with your current society. Dr. Song brought up a modified genetic model on her tablet. These would be new variations of your species, evolved for your present needs rather than exact replicas of the past. Mira frowned. That sounds like continuing the manipulation that caused this problem. Not exactly, Scientist Ju replied. The original manipulation was done to suppress other aspects. This would be designed to create harmony while ensuring survival. Elder Naira studied the proposal carefully. Would this provide genuine genetic stability? Not just for a few generations, but permanently. Dr. Song nodded. The model shows 98% probability of long-term viability. It wouldn't be exactly like your original three-aspect system, but it would be sustainable. The discussions continued late into the night. By morning, a compromise proposal had been drafted. Captain Lee sent a secure message to Earth Command, explaining the situation and requesting guidance. The response came quickly. Proceed with caution. Provide scientific assistance only. Final decisions must be made by Kyrians themselves. 3 days later, the council reconvened. Elder Naira and Elder Tella stood together to present the compromise plan. The chamber was even more crowded than before, with Kyrians packed into every available space. We propose a gradual restoration program, Elder Naira announced. Modified catalyst and shaper genetics will be introduced slowly over several generations, allowing our society time to adapt. A transition council will be formed, Elder Tella continued, with representatives from all perspectives to guide this process. Our laws and customs will evolve as our biology changes. Not everyone was satisfied. Some traditionalists protested that any change threatened their way of life. Some progressives argued that the compromise didn't go far enough in restoring what was lost. As the debate grew heated, a young Kyrian scientist who worked with Lyra stood up. I have something to show you, she said, activating a holographic projector. The image showed the developing embryos, nurturers, catalysts, and shapers, their cells glowing with healthy light. These are not abstract concepts we're debating, she said quietly. These are our children, our future. They deserve a chance to live. The simplicity of her statement silenced the chamber. After a moment, the voting began. The compromise passed by a narrow margin. Outside the council chamber, Captain Lee found Mira waiting. Is this truly the right path? The young Kyrian asked. Changing ourselves to survive. Captain Lee looked up at the 3 moons visible through a crystal window. Life always changes to survive. The question is whether you change with purpose and wisdom, or let circumstance decide your fate. Mira considered this, then nodded slowly. Thank you for giving us the choice. 5 years had passed since the humans of the Harmony first answered Kyria's distress call. Captain Lee stood at the viewport of her ship, watching the now familiar blue-green planet grow larger as they approached. This was her third return visit, but the first time she had brought a full diplomatic delegation from Earth. "Nervous?" Ambassador Park asked, joining her at the window. "A little," Lee admitted. 5 years is a long time. Things change. "That was the whole point, wasn't it?" Park smiled. Their shuttle descended through Kyria's atmosphere, passing over forests and cities that looked much the same as before. But as they approached the capital, differences became apparent. New structures had been built, angular buildings with sweeping curves that somehow combined conflicting architectural styles into harmonious wholes. "Shaper influence," Park noted. The landing platform was crowded with Kyrians waiting to greet them. Captain Lee recognized Elder Naira immediately, her silver hair now completely white. Beside her stood Lyra, who had become chief geneticist after the breakthrough. But there were new faces too, Kyrians with orange and green skin tones, different body shapes, and varied features. As Lee stepped off the shuttle, a small green-skinned Kyrian child darted forward, breaking protocol to present her with a crystal flower. "Welcome back, Captain Earth Friend," the child said in careful human language before being gently pulled back by an apologetic orange-skinned adult. Elder Naira stepped forward. "Captain Lee, Ambassador Park, welcome back to Kyria. Much has changed since you were last here." "I can see that," Lee smiled, looking at the diverse gathering. The formal reception was held in a new building that combined elements of the old nurturer architecture with innovations that must have come from reborn Shaper minds. Inside, the Earth delegation mingled with Kyrians of all three aspects. Dr. Song, who had returned with the delegation, found Lyra supervising a group of young scientists. "The integration program has succeeded beyond our hopes," Lyra explained as they walked through the research center. The first generation of restored catalysts and shapers reached maturity last year. There were challenges, but fewer than expected. "And the genetic stability?" Dr. Song asked, professional interest overriding her awe at seeing the results of their work. "Perfect." Lyra activated a display showing population data. "No signs of degradation. The modified genetics you helped create have proven sustainable." In another part of the complex, Captain Lee met with the new tripartite council that had replaced the old governance system. It now included representatives from all three aspects of Kyrian society. "The transition wasn't without difficulty," explained Kato, a catalyst counselor whose orange skin had a subtle pattern of darker markings. "For generations, nurturers alone made decisions. Learning to incorporate different perspectives required patience. The improvements were worth it," added Vila, a green-skinned shaper who wore intricate metal jewelry that seemed to move with her gestures. "Our technology has advanced more in 5 years than in the previous 50. Catalysts have helped resolve community conflicts that once seemed impossible to mediate." Elder Naira nodded in agreement. "We are becoming whole again, but in a new way, not returning to the past, but creating a better future." That evening, a celebration was held in the central plaza of the city. Thousands of Kyrians gathered under the light of their 3 moons. Tables laden with food stretched in all directions, and music played on strange instruments. Captain Lee noticed how the 3 aspects naturally formed mixed groups, their different abilities and perspectives creating a dynamic energy. "They seem happy," she said to Ambassador Park. "Mostly," Park replied. "There are still traditionalists who resist the changes. Some isolated communities have refused to participate in the restoration program. That's their choice," a voice said behind them. They turned to find Mira, who had grown from an uncertain young rebel into a confident leader. She now served as liaison between the aspects. "We preserve their right to remain as they are," Mira continued. "But each year, more choose to join the integrated communities. The benefits become harder to deny." She led them to a quieter area where they could watch children playing. Blue, orange, and green forms darting together in games that seemed to have rules only they understood. "These children have never known a world of separation," Mira said proudly. To them, the three aspects working together is natural, the way things should be. Later in the evening, Elder Naira presented Captain Lee with an official gift, a crystal containing the complete genetic record of Kyria's restoration. For Earth's archives, she explained, a testament to what our peoples accomplished together, and a guide should other species face similar challenges. As the celebration continued into the night, Captain Lee found herself watching a group of young Kyrians performing a modernized version of the ancient unity ceremony she had witnessed years before. Instead of just nurturers circling the glowing pool, all three aspects moved in complex patterns, their different colored skin creating a living artwork as they danced. Beautiful, isn't it? Elder Tella had joined her, older now but still carrying herself with dignity. Lee was surprised to see her. Tella had been the strongest voice against the restoration. You seem at peace with how things turned out, Lee observed carefully. Tella watched the dancers for a moment before answering. I feared change would destroy us. Instead, it revealed parts of ourselves we had forgotten. She pointed to where catalysts were helping younger dancers learn the steps, while shapers adjusted the lighting to enhance the performance. We are stronger together than we ever were apart. The next morning, as the Harmony prepared to depart, a formal delegation came to see them off. Among them was a young male catalyst, barely adult, who stepped forward with unusual confidence. I'm told, he said in perfect human language, that without your help, I would never have existed. None of us would. He gestured to the other young catalysts and shapers. We voted to name our generation the Bridge Children, those who connect Kyria's past to its future. Captain Lee looked at these young Kyrians, living proof of what science, diplomacy, and courage could accomplish. What will you do now? She asked them. The young catalyst smiled. We're building a ship, the first Kyrian vessel designed for long-distance space exploration. We hope to visit Earth someday, to continue the friendship between our worlds. As the shuttle lifted off and Kyria grew smaller below them, Ambassador Park made notes for her official report. How should we summarize this mission? She asked Captain Lee. Lee watched the planet, with its 3 moons forming a perfect triangle, until it was just a blue-green dot in the blackness of space. Right that we answered a call for help and found friends among the stars, she said. And that sometimes saving a species means helping them rediscover who they truly are.